Have on Florida. First off, we're going to go ahead and start off with the National Hurricane Center's website here. Now, earlier when I was making the updates, I had seen it go from tropical depression to tropical storm within about 5 minutes. It did make tropical storm status about 6 hours ahead of schedule due to rapid convective development. And right now, its west movement is west at 13. It's going to start to take a slight curve as planned and expected. Right now, sustained wind is around 40. Now, I do think that given the latest water vapor imagery and infrared satellite imagery, I do think that it has the potential to become hurricane status before Monday. I do think between 5 o'clock and 11 o'clock Sunday night, I do think that it has the potential to become a hurricane, maybe 5 to 10 hours prior than what we are expecting. So if that does occur, if we can get it to become a hurricane and become further more organized and developed before it goes over the landmass of western Cuba, the area of landmass it's going over in western Cuba is not, it's low. Elevation is low. So it's not going to have a dramatic effect on the degradation of the convective development and the cyclonic flow. So it's not going to have a big impact on that. So one of the things I also want to point out, and someone else told me this as well, and I went over and I told them, like, look, this isn't going to impact the system. So we have a area of low pressure over here in Texas, southern Texas, northeast New Mexico, and what's happening is it's actually pulling in a little bit of that moisture and that flow from Tropical Storm Ian, and as you can see, it's starting to cut the flow off. We've had some drier air across northeast Texas and southeast Oklahoma, and stretching down into Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, and the extreme northern Gulf. So, but what's happening is we have some thunderstorm development over here in the Atlantic, and what's happening is it's saturating that drier air at the surface and about 5,000 feet up. It's starting to saturate that drier air and overtake. So that drier air is going to be very minuscule to the effect of convective and tropical development as this goes into that area. So I expect that drier air to become saturated with the moisture. So I don't think that it's going to have a negative effect on it. So another thing we're going to go ahead and look at here is try to make this as quick as possible because I just did it on the profile. So this is the infrared. So let it update here. So this shows the temperature of the cloud tops. The brighter the colors reflects the more robust convective thunderstorm development. And we had an explosive, consistent flare over the last few hours with a flare of convective development to the southeast quadrant of the circulation. And that is being ingested into the flow of the circulation, and that's going to help further strengthen this. It is being ingested. Also to note, it is widening. The circulation is starting to widen as well. Now another thing I want everyone to pay attention to is so there's when you look at a satellite image, you have these clouds right here actually higher up, and then you have the image below. Right here, you see this flow going like this. That's actually closer to the surface. Those are winds accelerating and broadening. And that's a very good sign that the system is becoming more developed. And right now we're seeing some rapid developing. As we go through a little bit later in the night between 3 a.m. and 6 a.m., you're going to see some of that convective development start to wind down. That's because of the angle of the sun, and you lose some of the heating, okay? But the environment that it's going into, just 200 to 250 miles off the coast of Florida, you're looking at water temperatures between 83 and 87 degrees. Absolutely impressive. So, very good, favorable environment, anticyclonic, good, there's not very much shear at all, if not any. So it's a very good, conducive environment to have this go into if you like hurricanes. So one of the other things we're going to look at is the intensity guidance forecast. This is ensembles. What you look for when you're looking at this is you look for a group of ensembles and you try to see, okay, this is clustered together. You want to try to see how tight they are together over a certain parameter. So like category 3, I do think that we're looking at a medium category 3 to potentially low-end category 4. It's not out of the question. It is a scenario. It is a possibility to have a category 4 hurricane out of this. But I think realistically, at least right now, we're looking at a category 3 pretty easily. Don't get that mixed up. A category 3 is a major hurricane. It is going to cause significant problems. You're going to lose power. You're going to lose structures. It's going to create havoc. It's going to, potentially cost billions. It's going to, potentially some very, very destructive environment. And you're looking at, billions of dollars in damage potentially from the system if everything comes together and we get what the models are saying. Now, the models are very good in agreement right now. There's not a big model indifference. So I do think that seeing a category 3 to a category 4 out of this does seem like a pretty likely situation and whatnot. Now, Sunday and Monday we'll have a lot more data. And we'll start to see some of that data start to reflect local impacts. Now, another thing to mention is that when we're going to go back over here to the National Hurricane Center map. Now, let's say that this depiction, the track, doesn't change. It will change, but this is a scenario, okay? So we're going to say at 8 o'clock Tuesday, we hit major hurricane status, all right? That, I looked at the, I looked at the land, I looked at the coastline of Florida, and I drew a distance chart from there to the center of circulation. It's 130 miles to 150 miles out. So if we hit hurricane status before Monday, that tells me that we have the potential that it could hit major hurricane status before Tuesday, right before getting into the western island of Cuba. If that does happen, and it does take this path, and even if it deviates by 50 miles, the scenario kind of still plays out the same. So you're going to have a lot more time over open water with an already organized tropical system. And that being said, that's why I say a Category 4 is not out of the question. It is a possibility. Things will change between now and then. Another thing to also keep in mind, when you have a rather large, strong hurricane, you have what is occurrence called track wobble. You can have it wobble by as much as 10 to 15 miles. Now the thing is to look at when we're Monday and then Monday morning. Tuesday very early morning. We're gonna start. I'll be in Florida. It's a 20-hour drive for me, but I'm gonna start looking at the reconnaissance data, and I'm gonna see how wide the wind field is. The hurricane force wind field, the tropical force, storm force wind field, tropical depression. There's different. You have a certain set of miles from the center of circulation, the eye, to the furthest extent, and every tropical system is different with that. So it just depends. Also, I do think that this will slow down. I do believe that it will slow down as it's making its way, as it's approaching Florida. I do think it's going to slow down. And with that being said, like I discussed in the previous live, that's only going to potentially exasperate the structures, power grid, and other things at the surface, because when you have a slower moving system, you have a system that is sitting over the same area, and those winds are just battering those structures. You get the structures are, once you get a weak spot in a structure, it will find it and utilize that weak spot, and it will expose it and go from there. So Hurricane Sally in the past was a good example of that, that I intercepted. It underwent rapid shotgun strengthening as it made landfall, but it peeled concrete off the side of the hotels, and it was a Category 2. This isn't stucco material. This is solid, smooth concrete with no porous design to it. So I say porous. Microscopically, when you have 150 mile an hour winds, if you look in a microscope, electron microscope, the pores are opening and closing in that material, I think about 5,000 times a second. So microscopically, when you have those type of winds hitting an object, its pores are expanding and retracting constantly. And so that's why I say whenever you have a hurricane or tropical system over the same area, for a longer period of time, it tends to exasperate the materials on a microscopic level, and then eventually it becomes a viewable problem. So keep it in mind. Things are going to change. I hope you all find this information very helpful and interesting.